This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get flat. I got 6 jobs. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get down. I don't get it. I don't get down. I don't get tired. Get flat. I got 6 jobs. I don't get full-time artist.
Thank you for downloading the latest edition of Two Bad Hombres. I am the Doc, John Macaroon, wishing everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I'm recording this Saturday morning. Looking forward to talking to you about all the good things happening in the world of Detroit sports. Vito, super busy guy, not able to attend this recording. He's doing great things out there in Brighton, working with the Legacy Football Organization, checking out all the great camps and the work being done there. Also doing great work with Sound Mind, Sound Body, and also things going on with the Detroit Free Press and his coverage there. So he's not able to attend this week's recording. He'll probably be back next week with myself. This is the 103rd edition of Two Bad Hombres. I'm looking forward to it. Really interesting week that occurred in the world of Detroit sports, especially with the Detroit Lions, and some things that came to light in regards to Matt Patricia and his first year with the organization and how he conducts his business. Really interesting stuff to talk about regarding the news that he sometimes was late to team meetings and that he struggled with his media obligations in terms of showing up on time. I want to talk about that, tie that into stuff that goes on here in the podcast and with other people as well in terms of priorities. Meaning, okay, just look to what happened on Thursday and Friday after the report was made. Did Matt Patricia show up an hour late to his presser? No. I think one of the meetings that he had with the media was scheduled to start at 11, and boom, he showed up right at 11. What does that say? Priorities. It says that once something was highlighted in terms of the way that he was acting, then boom, he changed it. Why did he all of a sudden change the way, in the manner in which he addressed the media? Why? Because it was highlighted nationally that a situation went down earlier this week in which he delayed a talk with the media by about 25 minutes, and he let people know, I'm going to be late. Then he showed up an additional 30 minutes late to that. And why it caused a problem for the media was that the opposing coach this week, Joe Philbin, was going to be on the phone line for a presser, for a phone conference. And so the media had to struggle to decide, okay, Matt Patricia hasn't started his yet. We got to go in and address Joe Philbin on the phone. And so that caused a problem. And so it was tweeted out by Justin Rogers of the Detroit News. And he comes out and he says, you know what? This has been kind of a pattern all season long in the manner in which Matt Patricia has come out and handled these pressers. Well, other media went to research and used their connections and their relationships to ask former players. They went and they asked and they said, hey, how has Matt Patricia been in terms of the way in which he's acted all year? And former players came out and said, you know what? He's not only been late to media engagements, he's late to team meetings. And once that hit, then a lot of people got upset. And it's really interesting. Some people are like, this is news. Some fans of the Lions, some people that are really interested in just the football are kind of wondering and upset with the media and saying, well, why is this even an issue? Why are you guys harping on Matt Patricia in the way in which he conducts team meetings? Okay, well, first of all, nobody has heard of this before where a head coach shows up late to team meetings. Nobody has heard of this where a coach is supposed to show up for the media talk at like 10:30 and doesn't show up till like 10:45 or 10:50. Now, some of the media diminished it and said, look, it's not that big a deal. We're already in the building. But it speaks to the challenges that a first-year head coach has. Now, you just look back to Jim Caldwell, okay, and what does everybody say about him? He was great Monday to Saturday, just terrible on Sunday. Well, you still got to give him credit for the work that he did Monday through Saturday, meaning he was able to run meetings meticulously. Everybody said that, his work ethic, his ability to time things out was planned to a T. Okay, and so that's why the Lions were able to be somewhat organized in the couple seasons he was coaching the Detroit Lions. Remember, he got 9 wins. And you know what? I have a little bit more respect for Jim Caldwell in the fact that, look, he got the Lions to the postseason. He got the Lions to look a little bit more respectable. Now, could he win us? Could he win the Detroit Lions the ultimate prize? No. And in the end, that's what it's about. So I don't have a problem. I'm not sitting here bashing the Lions for letting go of Jim Caldwell, because that should always be the goal. But now you turn your attention to Matt Patricia and you say, wow, this first-year head coach has done a lot of things that haven't been well. He's done a lot of things that would make you go, wow, after that many years working under Bill Belichick, you were just the assistant, you were just a defensive coordinator. You never really kind of peeked at what Bill Belichick was doing. You just really stayed in the film room and watched film and worked with your players. You never really thought that one day you would be the head coach of a major football team. You never really thought and figured out how to prepare for that. That's a big problem for the Detroit Lions and for Matt Patricia. The news that came out regarding his inability to maintain meetings on time is a major story. And it's not one that you should just blow over and say, oh, well, he's learning on the job, or, oh, it's no big deal. No, it's important because it's about priorities. It's about the fact that, hey, we're all busy. You know, some people will message me and say, oh, I couldn't get this done, or this is not feasible. What does that say about your commitment to the deal? What does that say about your priorities, that you can't find 30 minutes to record something, or you can't find 10 minutes a day over 3 days to piece something together? Okay, well, I sure as hell know that if I dropped 2 G's in your pocket, then you'd make it a priority. Well, you look at it and you say, you know what? In this day and age, it's about priorities. It's about getting stuff done. Because once it was highlighted for Matt Patricia, once it made Deadspin and once it made national news, bam, Thursday, Friday, he's on time for his media obligations. So what does that say? Okay, it says that once something is a priority and once you figure it out that this is something that has to be done right, that being on time is super important, you get your shit together. And it shouldn't have come to having the media put pressure on you and embarrass you for you to do it. It should be a priority that once you started realizing, oh boy, that I'm planning these meetings, they're not going right, it should have been done in the first month. It doesn't take 4 months to correct something if you don't think it's wrong. And that's a problem with Bob Quinn, realizing that how do you not know that your head coach is not showing up to team meetings on time? How do you not know that? How is that not nipped in the bud? Because it's unheard of. Nobody has come out and said that this happens with regularity in the National Football League. I even messaged from our Twitter account at Detroit Podcast. I messaged Tom Lydon and I said, was this something that was talked about in New England with Bill Belichick, or was this something that was ever an issue? He's like, no, this was never an issue. And he brought it back to the point that there are some players that are now willing to talk negatively against Matt Patricia, and it goes to show you even more that there's evidence of discontent with the Detroit Lions that some people have not bought in. Now, look, I think it's great that, relationships were fostered and these players came out and told the truth. They were asked the question, is Matt Patricia on time for team meetings? And they came out and said no. Do they have an axe to grind? I mean, if they're willing to speak, then probably they're not happy. And some people have started to maybe even question who those players are. But look, I respect Dave Burkett. I respect those that go out and research and ask those questions. It is telling in regards to what Matt Patricia and how he was able to run his ship the first year. It's very telling. It is newsworthy. It's not something you disregard because of the fact that the big question people are asking is, have people bought in? Well, how can you ask people to buy in to you as a leader when you're not willing to do more and to follow strict guidelines, especially in the world of football where everything is so structured, meetings are organized, everything has to take place in a manner that is timely and organized, and it's about priorities. And so I look at it like, look, it's a holiday. I'm busting my butt to see a bunch of clients because I took a lot of time off earlier in the week. I got a lot of clients this Saturday. There's a bowl game going on today. Michigan takes on Florida at noon. I was invited to go out, but I can't because I have clients all the rest of today from noon up until 8 o'clock. Okay, so you have priorities, but you find a small little window, a half an hour window when you can record a podcast, and you come in and you do the job. You thank the sponsors that paid you. You thank the people that allow you to broadcast. You make something a priority. And this podcast to me is a priority. So, when you look at it just in terms of the Doc and Jock podcast, okay, because we're a network, we have up until this point in time, I think 8 or 9 weekly shows that air on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And this is a priority to me, obviously, in that you hear my voice roughly 3 to 4 times a week across various platforms, and Adam makes fun of me for being on a lot of the shows, but I make this a priority. I grew this thing with an interest in broadcasting and an interest in sharing my thoughts about life and in relation to sports and things like that. So I'm interested. I'm passionate about the project. Okay, so I like to turn on the microphone and talk into it and discuss sports. It's a priority of mine, especially when companies take a chance and sign, and their marketing people sign on the dotted line saying, look, definitely want to work with you. We want to be able to get our name across out there, build our brand, and thank you for working with us and partnering with these different companies and outlets and things like that. So it's important. It's important to me to maintain those relationships, and some people will come out and say, oh, we're good with these people. We don't have to fulfill those obligations. Wrong. You got to fulfill obligations, and I always want to thank our sponsors that make this broadcast possible and also help keep the lights on here in Sterling Heights. I want to thank Top Cat Sales. I want to thank the Detroit Sports Commission. I want to thank the Legacy Football Organization for allowing this broadcast to take place and for being great sponsors of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We greatly appreciate it. Again, thanks to Top Cat Sales, the Legacy Football Organization, and the Detroit Sports Commission. Great sponsors, long-term sponsors who work with us and allow us to broadcast. And it's a priority. It's a priority to be able to broadcast and to have a lot of shows come out regularly. We don't take a lot of time off across the shows. I think each show maybe on the network takes maybe a week off here and there, and then what we do is we sprinkle other hosts in to fulfill the obligation so that you can trust that on most days there will be podcast content on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And if you just want to hyper-focus on one podcast, the flagship podcast on the network, it's the Doc and Jock podcast, the podcast that Adam Straczynski and I started back in September of 2013. And up until this point, we've run about 282 straight podcasts, meaning every single week, despite getting married, despite having kids, despite Adam taking a trip overseas, Adam and I have worked together to create a show that comes out every single Thursday consecutively with no time offs, no best of shows, none of this fill-in hosts, things like that. Adam and I have done most of the shows together. I've done all of them. Doc and Jock has come out every single Thursday for 5 years, and I think I've been on all of them. And Adam might have missed 2, and that's when Kenny filled in and things like that. So, what does that say? It means that the Doc and Jock podcast is a priority to Adam and I. And I know it is because Adam shows up here across various jobs. Adam Straczynski, if you guys don't know, a guy that's busting his ass trying to get on the air and work hard and learn the radio business and to be the best host that he can be. He has 3 other jobs that he does, but yet he makes it a priority to make a schedule that allows him to show up here every single Wednesday, no matter what. Despite different jobs, obligations, being a media member that can go to the Lions game, he makes it a priority to show up here. And obviously, we have fun, and he's compensated fairly to do this, but it's a priority for him. And it's important for me to feel that it's a priority, that even if you're busy, even if you got 100,000 things you're doing, if it's a priority, you get the job done. And that's how we can tie into Matt Patricia, is that I'm shocked that being on time for team meetings wasn't a priority. Even if you are learning on the job, even if it's like, even if it's a situation in which you're learning and the first couple meetings don't go exactly right and people come in and it throws off your schedule, you haven't adjusted, you haven't learned, you haven't figured out how to put together a schedule that you can follow that will allow for a smooth transition week in and week out. Remember, these type of things aren't highlighted if you're a 10-win football team. But when you're a 5-win football team, the first thing people start doing is trying to figure out, why the hell is this team not winning? Why the hell has this team got only 5 wins when they had 9 last year? And there's certain things that are acceptable. that you can point to as to why the Lions have struggled in regards to Marvin Jones being injured, Golden Tate being traded away. The offense has been scaled way down, and there are certain things that are unacceptable, meaning some schemes that have been put in place, the unwillingness to unleash Matthew Stafford, some of the decisions that Matt Patricia has made in-game have been unacceptable. And so you look at it and you say, wow, the manner in which the Lions get down and the manner in which they conduct themselves is totally wrong. It's totally unacceptable, and this is why an organization takes a step backwards. And this is why when we look at Matt Patricia and you evaluate his first year, a complete embarrassment. I'm sitting here wondering, what are your priorities? Is it to try and keep everything in-house, keep everything a secret, and not fulfill obligations in a proper manner? Because these things get out. It's shocking to hear former players say those things. I mean, most of the time with the Detroit Lions, things are kept in-house. But this situation was not good for Matt Patricia. To sum it up, it was not good. It was not something that should have come out. It's something that Matt Patricia has to button up, and it was an issue. It's a serious issue, and one in which I'm glad it came out. I definitely, when I read his response to it, Adam just literally, on the latest Doc and Jock podcast, he flipped his lid. He's like, what kind of stupid-ass answer is that? In order to, when Matt Patricia comes out and says, we all got to be adaptable, you have to adapt to these type of things. It just was unacceptable, and sometimes you have to kind of highlight what people are doing when they're not making things that are a priority. And for Matt Patricia and for others, you got to realize things are important. It's not okay just to make excuses. It's not okay to be somebody that doesn't fulfill obligations, especially when things are going to get worse. Imagine if Matt Patricia does turn this around and he's got to be in the Super Bowl, okay? And he takes the Detroit Lions, in some miracle fashion, gets them through a playoff run and gets them to a Super Bowl. You don't think the schedule is going to, change dramatically that week of the Super Bowl? How are you going to handle it? Are you going to show up to media day for the Super Bowl an hour late? You're just going to show up whenever you feel like it, when all the fans are going to be clamoring to see you and learn about what the team did and how they were and your personality? You can't act like that. And so I hope that he realizes that the job of the Detroit Lions head coach is to be organized, is to make things a priority, and is to run the ship effectively. And that's why I just think that, and I talked to Adam about it, I really believe that the next head coach of the Lions has to have head coaching experience, has to have the resume that includes a Super Bowl win on it. Because what have we had here for the better part of, 2 decades? Coaches that have been successful, coaches that have been to the Super Bowl, but not many that have actually won it as the head coach of another franchise. And I think that's next for the Detroit Lions, is to build up the team, build up, the depth, and maybe get your franchise quarterback, the next one in here. And then if Matt Patricia doesn't work out, finally go out there, find a coach that has won the Super Bowl before and bring him here. Let him work his magic and try to do it again, because after this season, the hill seems a lot higher. A lot of people were definitely frustrated as a result of what occurred in 2018. And the Detroit Lions, what we can hope for this weekend is a big loss. We have to hope that the Detroit Lions realize that they've done a good job of, at the end of the year, losing so they can have the highest draft pick. Okay, and so there's been a debate regarding, can these athletes go out there and lose, and tanking, and everybody going back and forth, and those that say anytime an organization goes out there, they're supposed to win. But for the Detroit Lions, this might be the only time in the next 5 years where they may draft as high as number 2, likely if they lose, sticking around at number 4 or 5 in the NFL draft. There's an opportunity to go out there and to draft an impactful player, so that's the right thing to do, to lose. Now, how many of us are sitting here going, man, the Detroit Lions are going to go to Lambeau. They're going to probably play their best game. They're going to put it all out there. And maybe we see Jim Bob Cooter in his last stand, his last game with the Detroit Lions, his last game working with Matthew Stafford, just air it out. We see Kenny Galladay with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns and multiple passes over 15 yards. And we would be like, man, where's this been all year? And Matt Patricia will take all the credit for adapting and making a game plan that actually worked. But for the Detroit Lions, the thing that's in their best interest this Sunday is to go out there and lose. For the Detroit Lions, they have to have that high draft pick. They have to have leverage, and they have to have the ability to maybe, take that fifth pick and trade down and get multiple picks and get guys in here that will contribute. And this is a key offseason for them because, some beat reporters that have gone on the radio are starting to say, you know what? If in 2019 they get off to a bad start and the Detroit Lions with that schedule, a fourth-place schedule, if they only have 5, 6, 7 wins and they don't get to the postseason, there might be serious talk, serious consideration in replacing Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia after year 2. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even wrap my mind around the fact that could even be a possibility because of the fact that the Lions and Martha Ford have been loyal to previous regimes. And so could this regime be ended after 2 years? Is that a possibility? I think so, because of how disastrous this year was, because of the fact that Bob Quinn, in one of his first major decisions outside of keeping Jim Caldwell, one of his first major decisions was to extend Matthew Stafford, give him a boatload of money, basically handcuffing the organization to this guy. And the return so far has been abysmal. Many people now, fans of the Lions, are jumping off the bandwagon in terms of everybody. A lot of fans, if you ask them, the people that message us on Twitter at Detroit Podcast, they message us like, I don't have faith in Bob Quinn. I don't have faith in Matt Patricia, and I definitely don't have faith in Matthew Stafford. And that can't happen going forward. What has to happen, a couple goals for the Detroit Lions in 2019, is to build respect, is to build the bridge of support between the organization and the fans, because we're not talking specifically about 2018 and the disaster that this season has been. We're talking about collectively this organization being one of the worst in the history of the NFL, and it just keeps coming back up. Same old Lions. They're showing up in shows regarding how bad they suck and they're a national joke. We got documentaries, talking about the fans and how much they love the Lions, and yet the organization is abysmal. These are the kind of things that got to get turned around eventually. The organization's got to do some things to try and turn this around, and it starts next year. It starts with this offseason after the season's done, and obviously one of the first moves that's going to be made is Jim Bob Cooter is going to be let go. That is going to happen. Changes must be made to the staff, and it's going to be a priority for Matt Patricia to go out there and find an offensive coordinator that he can trust to run an offense that suits the guy that he has. He's come out, Matt Patricia, whether you believe it to be correct or not, he gave the ringing endorsement to Matthew Stafford and said, that's my guy. That's my quarterback, and this is a guy that we got to do a better job of surrounding with better talent. So he came out and he said it. He said that we got to do a better job of surrounding Matthew Stafford with talent that can help us get to the goal of a long playoff run and maybe getting to the Super Bowl. Whether you agree with that, and Matthew Stafford was asked, and he said that he's willing to stay in Detroit. He's heard, the questions regarding the national media coming out and saying that he's going to be traded. I just don't see it. I mean, literally, I would fall out of my chair if Matthew Stafford was traded by this organization, because it would be a massive cap hit. It would be really an acknowledgement of a major mistake in terms of rewarding a guy that hasn't done much, a major contract. It would be a significant admission regarding a decision that was made by Bob Quinn. I would be shocked if that was the decision that was made. But what's going to happen first is you're going to realize that Jim Bob Cooter is going to fall on the sword. He's going to get fired, and Matt Patricia has to go out there and find a guy. And a name that's kind of floated to the surface, a guy that may be fired from his position, is Adam Gase, and a guy that's been in the division before. I believe he was a coach of now the Miami Dolphins, and he's a guy that obviously hasn't had that much success, and he may be able to come in here and handle the business and things like that. So could he come in here and right away help to work with the Detroit Lions? I think so. I think there's an opportunity for him to come in based upon his track record. And to clarify, he's the current head coach of the Miami Dolphins. He's coached previously for the LSU Tigers, coached for the Lions, the Niners, the Broncos, and the Bears. He's had working relationships with other teams, and he has worked with offenses in the National Football League. I believe his succession was he was the coordinator of the Bears and then went to become the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. It just hasn't worked out. So could he come here? Could he come here and right away be the offensive coordinator? That is the rumor, and I think that would be something that could be effective. But what does Stafford and that offense need to do? Well, obviously, I think when people are looking at what's going on with the organization, you need more talent across the board on the offensive line. You probably need a tight end that you're going to get in the draft. You probably need additional depth at running back behind Kerryon Johnson. You just need a lot of things in order to make this offense run smooth. But the biggest thing that's needed is a scheme that is progressive, a scheme that can be run that highlights the strength of Matthew Stafford. And to close this podcast, something that's just been bothering me has just been Matthew Stafford. Let's not talk about his play on the field, okay? Let's not talk about how he talks and how he dismisses reporters, how he hates Adam. We're not going to talk about that. I want to talk about the way in which he works with the organization. And it's a situation in which this guy's been here 10 years, and he's a company guy, and he's a guy that's taken a boatload of money from the organization. When I started this podcast, I talked about priorities, okay? If you just put it this way, if Matthew Stafford's priority, his priority was to win, and that's his singular focus is to do whatever he can to win, okay? I question why he would stay here, because the future looks grim. The future looks terrible. And so that's why some people are frustrated, is that they can extrapolate and question his loyalty. They can question his motivation to win. Is his motivation just to be a company guy and to collect a big paycheck? That's the biggest frustrating part about this entire nonsense, is that Matthew Stafford, when you pay a guy $27 million, you also can say that he has a voice. You would think that Matthew Stafford, he was asked earlier this week, like, how much input does he have? And he's like, they don't ask me. They don't ask you? How is that possible when you're the highest paid guy in the organization? You're the face of the franchise. Matt Patricia doesn't ask you what you think about the offense. You don't have an input, or you don't care, or are not bummed out that the guy that you stood up for, that Jim Bob Cooter, your offensive coordinator, you don't care that he's about to be broomed out? You don't, maybe fight for him and say, look, get us this or get us that, or stand at the podium and talk to the organization through the media saying, look, I'm sick and tired of this bullshit. I'm sick and tired of losing. I'm sick and tired of getting my ass kicked at the beginning of the year and getting sacked and running all over the place. Get me help so I can win. You don't do that? And if you look at it and you say, what's your priority? How has this been able to fester this long? How has Matthew Stafford been willing to show up there and get beat up week in and week out with nothing to show for it, with the end result being nothing? I know the money's good, you take care of your family, the organization likes you, but I think what is frustrating most fans and why people are so upset is the question's got to be asked and really answered in regards to Matt Stafford. Why isn't your priority number one and number two and number three winning? Why isn't your priority doing anything in your power, whether it be speaking, whether it be, destroying things in the office, whether it be, on game day when it's 3rd and 19 and they call a 2-yard pass, you just don't run it. You just absolutely check out of that play and try to run a play in which you realistically are showing people that you're trying to get the first down. Why don't you try your absolute best to make winning a priority? That the number one thing you talk about is we are doing a terrible job of, putting a product on the field that these fans can be proud of, that I'm proud of. How does he this year run that offense if you're thinking about winning? And Matt Patricia could come in and tell you, yeah, we're going to be conservative. Yeah, we're going to try and do this. And yeah, we're going to try and do that. But you're the quarterback. You've played 10 years. Do you not know that, 3-yard passes, 4-yard passes that go nowhere, that don't get first downs or aren't completed, aren't going to give you a chance to win? So change it up. Try to go and work with Jim Bob Cooter and work with that offense that's going to work. How after the Miami game when you were rolling and everything was going so well, do you not create a system that's going to continuously help the team win? How? How is that possible? How is it possible that you were able to call these plays so freely and be comfortable with it, especially when there were so many plays that were disastrous? I mean, at some point in time, you might even question Stafford for even playing hurt because of the fact that, look, you're going to be needed and potentially called upon in 2019 to lead this organization. And if your back hurts, if your back is that, devastated and you're that injured, sit down. You know what? Commit to winning. 100% Matthew Stafford should be criticized and questioned regarding his commitment to winning, because we talked about it years ago. Some people are now bringing it to light now. I question his commitment to winning when he, negotiated with the Lions. He should have said, look, get me the fuck out of here. This organization's terrible. Why the hell would I stay here for another decade? For $27 million a year, I'd take 25, or I'd take 19, 20 million. I'd take way less to go to a winner, to experience joy. And I'm going to wrap up this podcast by just questioning his priority in terms of number one, number two being winning. Similar to Matt Patricia in terms of his priority in terms of running a tight ship. Early on, he did not do that. It wasn't a priority. And then once it was called out, Matt Patricia was then willing to show up on time this week and will likely get better as the years progress. But for Matthew Stafford, I just think that when you pay a guy that much money and you set him up for life and you basically don't push him, then that's what happens. We're not highlighting enough the fact that this guy's not a winner. And look, it's great. I just, when I look at Matthew Stafford's football resume, saying he's a nice guy doesn't do it for me. Great, you're supposed to be a nice guy. You're supposed to take your $27 million and spread it around and do things for the community. Most people that are decent would, but I don't want the defense of Matthew Stafford to be that he's a nice guy and is charitable in the community. Is a charitable guy in the community. I don't want that to be his lasting resume. I'd like it to have some football wins. I'd like it to have some playoff appearances. I'd like it to have some highlights in the Super Bowl and maybe an appearance with a chance to win. That's all I'm talking about. Great. He's a great guy. He does things in the community. It's just his commitment to winning we got to seriously take a look at. And people's priorities. Because when you take a look at people's priorities, it's evident what some people are interested in, what they're willing to do, and how they're willing to grind and do things, even if they're busy. Even if they got 100 other things to do, they still find a way to contribute. Again, thanks everybody for tuning in. You're listening to Two Bad Hombres. Follow the show at Two Bad Hombres on Twitter. You can follow the network at Detroit Podcast. You can message anytime. I think we're the most interactive Detroit Sports Twitter page. Follow Adam and follow Vito. Follow the crew on Twitter. It's a great follow, and you'll see them on Twitter interacting. And definitely give support to Adam this upcoming weekend. Sunday, he'll be on the air on WDFN 10 a.m. Monday and Tuesday, he'll be on for 3 hours each with Ryan Elke, 3 to 6 on WDFN. And they take your calls and tweets, and it's a good show. And good luck to Michigan and Michigan State in the bowl game. I got a lack of interest, but everybody knows that I'll be rooting for Florida and rooting for Michigan State. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year. See everybody next time. You've just downloaded the latest edition of Two Bad Hombres.